What if the most valuable asset you will ever own is built on a foundation that is quietly disappearing? Not the land beneath it, not the lumber inside it. Something older, something every city on this list has been quietly gambling with for decades. You have heard of a housing bubble, inflated values crashing under economic pressure. But what happens when the pressure isn't financial? What happens when it's geological? When the very aquifer a metropolitan area drinks from begins to run dry, home values don't just correct, they collapse. Today, we are exposing 10 American cities where water scarcity has moved from environmental concern to existential financial threat, and where the housing market has not yet priced in the danger lurking directly beneath it. Subscribe now. What you are about to learn cannot be unlearned. And for homeowners in these cities, time is already running out. Las Vegas, Nevada. Picture it. Glittering towers, cascading fountains, lush golf courses carved from the Mojave Desert. Las Vegas looks like a city that conquered nature itself. Over 2 million people call the metro area home, and that number is still growing. So how could a city built entirely around the illusion of abundance possibly run out of water? Because that illusion has always had a single source of truth: Lake Mead, the Colorado River reservoir that supplies roughly 90% of southern Nevada's water. And Lake Mead is disappearing. Between 2000 and 2022, the lake dropped nearly 175 feet. Satellite imagery reveals a stark white bathtub ring scarring the canyon walls, a geological receipt for every year of overuse. The Southern Nevada Water Authority has implemented tiered pricing, turf removal mandates, and aggressive reclamation programs. And still, the math resists optimism. Now consider Phoenix, Arizona, a city that added over 100,000 residents in a single year while sitting in the driest stretch of the American Southwest. Both cities have been selling the same promise: growth without limit, in a landscape that has never once agreed to that deal. The housing markets in both metros surged 40 to 60% during the pandemic boom. Investors flooded in. Subdivisions expanded outward into raw desert. But here is what the listing photos never show. The water table feeding those subdivisions is already gone in some zip codes. The foundation was always sand. Now it is dry sand. Tucson, Arizona. Albuquerque, New Mexico. Both cities exist in a legal fiction that took over a century to construct. It is called prior appropriation, the Western water law doctrine that grants water rights based on historical use, not proximity, not need, not sustainability. In practical terms, this means a city can legally own rights to water that no longer physically exists in the volume it once did. Tucson holds paper rights to Colorado River water that are increasingly honored in fractions. Albuquerque pumps from the Rio Grande Basin, a river that has run completely dry at certain stretches in recent summers. The cruel irony is this: a developer can legally build 500 homes on a water allotment that the hydrology no longer supports. Permits are issued, mortgages are signed, families move in, and the invisible math continues to compound. Albuquerque's aquifer, the primary backup when surface water fails, has dropped over 170 feet in certain areas since the 1960s. The city is now paying to recharge it artificially. That is not a solution. That is a managed decline being mistaken for stability. Subscribe and follow this channel, because in the next chapter, we leave the desert entirely and discover that water collapse is not a regional problem. It is reaching cities you would never expect, and the housing consequences are already being quietly documented. The warning signs are there. They are just written in a language most buyers don't know how to read. Atlanta, Georgia. El Paso, Texas. Denver, Colorado. Atlanta receives over 50 inches of rain per year. It is lush, green, and perpetually humid. It looks nothing like a city approaching water crisis, which is precisely what makes it so dangerous. Atlanta sits at the headwaters of 3 major river basins, but it holds among the smallest per capita water reservoir storage of any major U.S. city. A prolonged drought in 2007 brought the city within 90 days of running out of water entirely. Not reduced water. Gone. Since then, Atlanta has been locked in interstate legal warfare with Alabama and Florida over rights to the Chattahoochee River. The U.S. Supreme Court has been compelled to weigh in multiple times. The resolution? Still pending. The population? Still growing, from 5 million toward a projected 8 million by 2040. El Paso draws from the Hueco Bolson Aquifer, a closed basin system with no natural recharge mechanism. Scientists project it depletes to unusable salinity levels within decades. The city has invested heavily in desalination and reclaimed water, but those systems operate at the edge of their capacity today, before the projected growth arrives. Denver, meanwhile, is the distribution hub for Colorado River water across the entire Front Range. As the river's flows decline, projected to drop 20 to 30% by 2050 under median climate scenarios, Denver's legal allocation and its actual supply begin a slow, irreversible divergence. Here is the financial consequence that is not yet priced in. When a municipal water authority declares supply constraints, insurers reassess, lenders reassess, and home values in water-stressed zip codes begin a quiet, sustained decline that looks, at first, like a normal market correction. It is not a correction. It is the beginning of something structural. Fresno, California. Salt Lake City, Utah. Fresno sits in the heart of the San Joaquin Valley, the agricultural engine of the nation. And for decades, that engine has been running on overdraft. Farmers and municipalities have been extracting groundwater faster than it recharges, causing the land itself to physically sink. This phenomenon is called subsidence, and in parts of the San Joaquin Valley, the ground has dropped by nearly 30 feet over the past century. Fresno's infrastructure, pipes, roads, flood channels, was engineered for a surface elevation that no longer exists. Replacing that infrastructure costs billions that municipal budgets do not have. But here is the threat that no one in the housing market is discussing. As the ground sinks, it compacts the aquifer permanently. The storage capacity is destroyed, not depleted, destroyed. It cannot recover. This is a one-way door. Salt Lake City faces a threat with a different and terrifying texture. The Great Salt Lake has lost over 73% of its volume. The exposed lakebed, nearly 800 square miles of it, contains decades of accumulated agricultural runoff, arsenic, mercury, and selenium-laced sediment. As the lake continues to shrink, prevailing winds carry that sediment across the Wasatch Front directly into the lungs of over 1 million residents. The University of Utah has already flagged this as a potential public health emergency. When a city's air becomes hazardous because its water is disappearing, the calculus for long-term residency changes. And when residency calculus changes, demand collapses. When demand collapses in a market that issued mortgages based on perpetual growth assumptions, you do not get a soft landing. You get Salt Lake City's housing market staring down a horizon it was never designed to see. Rio Verde Highlands, Arizona, and the signal it sends to every city on this list. This is where speculation ends and documented collapse begins. Rio Verde Highlands is a master-planned community northeast of Scottsdale. Thousands of homes, millions of dollars in property values, families who purchased on the promise of a fully serviced suburban life in the Sonoran Desert. In January 2023, Scottsdale, facing its own Arizona Department of Water Resources mandates, cut off water delivery to Rio Verde Highlands entirely. Overnight, residents who had paid $600,000 for a home found themselves hauling water in by truck at $500 per load just to maintain basic sanitation. Property values in the area dropped immediately. Some homeowners listed and couldn't find buyers at any price. Others simply stopped paying mortgages on homes that were functionally uninhabitable without trucked water. It was not a hurricane. It was not a fire. It was not a flood. It was a spreadsheet, a water availability audit, a municipal authority enforcing mathematical reality on a housing market that had been built on optimistic projections. Arizona's Department of Water Resources subsequently declared that the Phoenix metro area does not have sufficient groundwater to support 100-year water adequacy certification for tens of thousands of planned housing units. The state froze new residential development permits in several areas almost immediately. This is the mechanism. This is how it happens. Not in a dramatic single event, but in a sequence of bureaucratic adjustments that, taken together, constitute a structural withdrawal of the preconditions that justified the valuations in the first place. Subscribe and stay with this channel, because the dominoes are not hypothetical. They are already in motion, and the cities that fall next will be cities that looked nothing like a water crisis 2 years ago. The pattern across all 10 cities on this list follows the same architecture. Aggressive population growth outpaces sustainable water supply. Legal frameworks paper over the physical reality. Housing investment surges on the assumption of permanence. And then a single audit, a single court ruling, a single municipal decision, and the market discovers that the foundation it priced in never existed. This is not a distant warning. The Southern Nevada Water Authority has already modeled scenarios where Lake Mead drops below the intake pipes that supply Las Vegas. Engineers call it dead pool. Real estate analysts have not yet priced that scenario into a single listing on Zillow. The homes are still being built. The mortgages are still being signed. And the water table continues its long, silent retreat. 1 foot at a time, 1 drought year at a time, waiting for the moment the market finally does the math. That moment is closer than any of these cities' housing prices currently admit.